Good morning. Right. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever it is with you. This is my attempt to introduce you to Val Plumwood's book, Feminism and the Mastery of Nature. Val Plumwood was one of a group of radical feminist philosophers, environmentalists, ecofeminists in Australia. We'll come across another one of that group, Freya Matthews, later in this course. And I think she's really important because she is a really radical thinker and uses and really takes to pieces some of the underlying characteristics of the Western worldview. And in this book, just one other thing to say about her. I mean, she did some remarkable things. At one stage, it's worth having a look at some stage when you've got time. At one stage, she got nearly eaten by a crocodile when canoeing in northern Australia, and only just escaped with her life. And as a result, wrote about the nature of the human as prey, which is a rather interesting and appalling reversal of what we normally think about ourselves. That's an aside. So what she's writing about in Feminism and the Mastery of Nature is about oppression and dualism. And she argues, page 2, that all forms of oppression are based in a network of dualisms, and therefore understanding the logical structure of dualism is a really important aspect of learning about oppression. And just as a very brief introduction, that the analysis of dualism shows that this characteristical structure of otherness and negation, and it's very close to classical propositional knowledge, which, of course, since the Greeks has been part of Western culture. So this classical logic of instrumental reason brings us to dualism. And that's linked not only to feminism, but to environmental issues. And what she's arguing is that we don't have to throw out thinking if we're criticizing dualism. We just have to learn to think differently. It involves a redefinition and reconstruction of difference in less oppositional and hierarchical ways, which, as she goes on to point out later in the book, isn't difficult. But what happens in dualism is that which is defined as natural, and that is in a traditional patriarchal society, is the feminine. The feminine is strongly identified with the natural world in a traditional patriarchal view, or the environment itself is defined as passive, non-agent, non-subject. These are the invisible background conditions of which masculinity, or what she calls the master notion, typically the white Western male expert or entrepreneur, places himself in opposition to. So that's the introduction, an argument that understanding dualism, understanding what she calls the logic of mastery, which, as I've just said, defines other as passive and non-agent and non-subject, is fundamental to understanding the issues, both social and environmental, in the current world. So, chapter 1. She starts off page 22 by arguing that the concept of the human itself has been defined in masculine terms. And this, of course, is part of Rick Tarnas's argument in his book, The The Passion of the Western Mind, which he argues is essentially a masculinist story. Not that all men are involved in that, but as a masculinist story. So to say that, oh, we're all human, aren't we, isn't any good if the human is defined as masculine. So this leads her to think about what she calls the feminism of uncritical equality. She says that liberal feminism assumes that if women are the same as men, if women have the same rights and opportunities as men, then everything will be all right. But this is arguing that women must seek admittance on an uncritical equality strategy to the domination of nature. Women in this strategy are to join men in participation in areas from which they've been strongly excluded. And this uncritical equality, she says on page 28, endorses a model which is doubly phallocentric, for it is implicitly masculine not only in its account of the individual in society, but in its assumption what constitutes and is valuable in human identity in opposition to nature. And it fails to notice that such a rationalist model of human as exclusive of nature is one which writes not only assumptions of gender supremacy, but also of class, race, and species supremacy. So it's no use saying, well, we're all human, if human is defined as white, male, and Western. White, male, and Western is defined in opposition to that which is feminine, that which is nature. And it's that separation, which we'll come to later. But simply saying, oh, we're all the same, there's no, I'm colourblind or I'm race blind, doesn't address the fundamental issue that men assume they're humans and that women know they're women. So radical feminism, in its various forms, and there are many forms, sees that dominant forms of Western culture have been constructed through exclusion, control, deviation of the feminine, and hence of the natural. That's a good summary. Dominant forms of Western culture have been constructed, in part at least, through control, exclusion, and devaluation of the feminine, and hence of the natural. That's page 30. But a simple reversal model, which affirms women as nurturant and celebrates their wife-giving powers, conceives of remaking the culture in terms of rival masculining and feminizing strategies. So we need to understand the concept of dualism in order to understand what that reversal means. What do we mean by reversal? We mean reversal that say that women are nurturing, women are good, men are bad. Now we'll say women are Mother Earth and the fundamental nurturance, and however we shift it around and say no, we're going to see women as good and men as masculinity as bad, or something like that. That becomes a problem, because it's simply buying into the same sort of dualism. In dualism, the more highly valued side, males, humans, is construed as alienating and of a different order from the lower, inferiorized sides. This is page 32. Each is treated as lacking in qualities which make possible overlap, kinship, or continuity. The nature of each is constructed in polarized ways by excluding of qualities shared with the other. The dominant is taken as primary, and the subordinate side is defined in relation to it. So, uncritical reversal, in that sense, the situation, the argument, the radical feminist argument, or some radical feminist arguments that women are good, men are bad, we'll shift it up the other way, preserves and maintains the already dualism in the character of what is now is affirmed. Dualism is a process in which power forms identity, one which distorts both sides of what it splits apart, the master and the slave. If this is so, we cannot resolve the problem by a simple strategy of reversal, affirming the slave's character or culture, for this culture as it stands is not an independently constituted nature, but equally represents a distortion. It's a reflection of the dualist mirror of the master's character and culture. So, if we say women are nurturant, and that's the patriarchal definition, simply for the feminine to say, well, that's what we are and that's what's good, is still adopting the distorted perspective. What's at issue here is not the distinctions between men and women, this is page 33, not the distinctions between human nature, but their dualist constructions. The concept of the human has a masculine bias in Western culture, among others, because the male-female and human nature dualisms are closely intertwined, so much that neither can be understood without the other. And so any form of ecological feminism is therefore an integrative project. So what I'm understanding from that is, if we take dualism as this underlying splitting, and we'll get into that a little bit more in a minute, neither the strategy of uncritical reversal, neither the strategy of uncritical equality, which says women are like men, there's no difference, nor the strategy of uncritical reversal, which says more everything that women represents is fundamental and men is secondary. Neither of those work as strategies, because both male and female have been defined already, both human and nature have been defined already in terms of the masculinist model, the mastery model, which is the fundamental problem. So, if you can follow me as far as that, we've got chapter 2, where she goes into the nature of dualism in a very precise way. Dualism results from a certain kind of denied dependency on the subordinated other. We have a master and a subordinate, and fundamentally the master denies the dependency in the other. And the relationship of denied dependency determines a particular kind of logical structure, which gives the identity of both. So by means of dualism, she says, this is page 41, the colonized, whether that's feminists or people of colour or the natural world or whatever, the colonized are incorporated into the selfhood and culture of the master, which then forms their identity. The dominant conception of the human nature relationship is equally in that structure. We start with the human, the natural world is defined in relation to the human, rather than the human being seen as part of and integral in a co-defining partnership.